Hey, look at them go! Hi and welcome to the second part in the Among Us series. Today we're building multiplayer to this game, so we're going to use Socket.io to send the data between the players using WebSockets. So let's jump in. Branch you can use to start is the P1, not P1, P2 start branch. And then if you want to jump to the end of this video, then there's a P2 end branch as well. So let's start by installing the additional packages we need. So inside the client we need to npm install socket.io-client. And at the same time we can go into the server, and here we just npm install socket.io. In the server we also need to install Express. But before we continue further with the server, we can set up the client side events to see that we get them into the server at first. We should figure out what type of events we want to send and receive from the client. So here we will destructure out IO from socket.io client. Let's store our socket in a variable here, and inside the preload we can do socket equals IO, and the address will be localhost 3000. Let's first focus on the movement of the players. We have abstracted away move player into a file. So let's change how the move player function works. We will actually return a value, true or false, if the player moved or not. If player moved is true, then we know that we should do socket.emit move, and then we want to send an object where we say the x value is now player.sprite. And y is now player.sprite.y. Because that we need to stop and start the player move animation, we need to create another boolean to keep track of when the player stops moving. Inside player moved, we're going to set player.moved last frame to be equal to true, else player.moved last frame will be set to false. Because then we can check before we set it to false. We can actually, if player didn't move this turn but it did move last turn, then we can send another type of event through the WebSocket. Then we can emit an event that we're going to call move end, because that can trigger the animations to be stopped, so that it will become simpler. We don't have to have as much logic on the receiving end of the socket. Instead we know that when we should stop the run animations is when the other players are actually sending the event of move end. So we won't have a payload for the move end event now. So when we move, we just send the new coordinates, and then we said move end so we can stop the run animation. So this is how you send the events, but we also need to listen for the events. So let's create a dummy player here. Other player. So let's duplicate some code here. Other player. Okay, so now we have another sprite for the other player. So I don't think we need to create another animation. We can use the same animation for different sprites. So what we can do now is that we can add what the responses to the different socket events. So we can do socket.on move. This means another player moved. So we get the function, and we know that we get x and y in this one. So we do other player.x sprite.x equals to x, and other player sprite y equals to y. So now we've essentially moved the sprite. So let's keep track if this other player is moving or not. Other player moving is true. Socket on move end. Other player dot moving is false. So now we've updated the values on the other player object. I realize now we also need to flip the sprite. If the x becomes smaller or larger, we also need to flip the sprite. So if other player.x is larger than x, play other player.sprite.flip x should be true. Else other player.x Okay, so now we've handled the flipping of the sprite, the movement of the sprite. The only thing left is to look at this moving and turn on and turn off the running animation based on this moving prop. This last, animate other player. If other player dot moving, and we're not already playing, so other player dot sprite animes is playing. So it means that we are moving, but we're not running the animation. Other player dot sprite dot play running. Else if not other player moving, and we are playing, so other player dot sprite dot animes dot is playing, then we should other player dot stop running. Let's build a server first, and then we can see if the client is able to connect to the server. Okay, let's start with Express. So we call it right away to get the app instance, and then let's create an HTTP server. HTTP, and we pass in our Express app to the HTTP server, and now we can import socket.io, require socket.io, and we call socket.io immediately. We pass in our HTTP server. Inside this object is where we can put our options, and we need to put cores in here to say what allowed origins are able to connect. So we do origins, and it's just an array of strings. So we do http ://localhost 8080, which is where Webpack is serving the client. So now we can start to do the events here. We can do io.on connection. We do a callback and we say player connected. So inside this connection we get a socket passed in here. So we can do socket.on disconnected, or is it just disconnect? It's just disconnect. We can do player disconnected. And now let's add our custom events. So socket.on move. Here we will get some data, we'll get X and Y. Socket.emit move, and we're gonna pass X and Y as a payload. And for move end, we just do move end, and we remove the payload. Like that. So now let's make sure we can run this file inside Visual Studio Code. So we'll copy this launch and we call it server, and it's inside server and it's called index. So now if I go to debugger, other than mask, I also have server. So now I can set a breakpoint here and I can press play. No errors yet. Let's set the breakpoint one line higher. Yeah, seems okay. I think I forgot to start listening as well. So we have to end this file with http listen port 3000. And we can use a callback here just to print out server listening on. Let's try it out. Okay, everything seems okay. And if a client were to connect, I will stop here on this breakpoint. So now let's start the client. See if we have any errors. Okay, so it seems as we have our first client connected here. So let's set breakpoints on disconnect and on move and on move end, just to see what happens. Player connected. So now when I start to move here, we could end up sending an event to the server. And you see now we have two sprites here, and that is because we have one sprite for the player and another sprite for the other player. So if we look in the server, it seems as though we have not yet sent an event because it has not stopped here. Let's add some console logs also on the client side. Received move and received move end. So let's start the debugging here. We can look in the network tab, we can filter on just WebSocket content, and we can see if we reload here, we see that we have a connection to the server. It says switching protocols, so it switches to WebSockets, and then we can go into messages and we see that it's just the hello and the OK here. If I move, we can see that we are in fact not sending the move event. So let's debug why we're not sending that. We forgot to send something back from move player, so let's do that. Let's set a value here. Let player moved equals false, and then inside here we're moving, so player moved equals true. Let's copy this down in here and in here and in here, and then the last thing we do is that we return player moved. Okay, so now there's a bigger chance that we can actually see something. Okay, so I will start to move now, and immediately we get the move event at the server side. So let's see if we do have our X and Y values. So now it's about time that we should connect our second client. So we'll take another one, connect it to localhost 8080. So now we have two clients connected to the same server. So I'll get the network here as well, messages. Let's remove this breakpoint so that the server will emit the event to all connected clients. And same for move end. Okay, something has happened. A sprite has moved. Okay, I could see them both move for a little while. I feel like we are close. Let's try again. Do we have a console error? No console errors. Here we appear to have a console error. Otherplayer.stop is not the function. It's supposed to be otherplayer.sprite.stop. Sprite.stop. Okay, that's a little bit of progress. Except that both our players are moving at the same time. Probably another bug here somewhere. Here we have one more error. This should be sprite.x. But I don't think that is the main issue. Still glued together, but the flipping now works for both sprites. Okay, I think I understand what we have done here. If we look at just the console log of the first player, we receive our own event, but the second player does not even receive it, so there is a server error. And I think that I should not do socket.emit, I think, because that will just send this back to my own socket. I want to send it to the other connected sockets. So to achieve that, instead of socket.emit, we do io.emit. IO. So now we need to restart the server. Two players connected because the browsers were still open and was not reloaded. It's close. We can see that one of the sprites is running around on the other screen. That means that the move and the move end event is working. So it's starting and stopping the animation and moving the sprite. Okay, so we are still receiving our own events, which is not good, because if we look in the client code, on move we set other player's sprite. So when we receive a move, we want to know that it's not our own move, because that will just lead to the other sprite being moved with us. So I read on the Socket.io documentation, and though there is a way to broadcast to everyone but yourself. If you do socket.broadcast, socket.broadcast. So let's try that and see what happens. Hey, look at them go! That's super cool. So now we essentially have multiplayer working. So that's all for this video, and I hope that you found it educational and entertaining looking at me wrestling with Socket.io. I really like the library. So if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and so on. Thanks for watching. See you next time.